Hey, John. Welcome
Hey,
back.
Dr. T, how are you?
Welcome back to my SUSECON sundry store.
Thanks. You've changed it. It's a lot different. You've modernized.
Yeah, it's running Linux and a bunch of open source technology. It was actually very easy to put together. So the company shipped the equipment in a couple of boxes, and I got it together easier than an IKEA furniture.
Wow.
Oh, you have to be careful what you pick up in there. So did you want those chips?
Are they any good?
No, well, actually, I prefer the red ones.
Oh, these guys.
Yeah, be careful, I told you.
Wow. So, I mean, you've done a lot here. What's going on?
So I'm getting updates on my software on the application without having anybody to come from corporate office to help me with that.
So nobody came to no overnight. You just did it all yourself.
Just plug in it and patches, updates. If the hardware fails, I get a new hardware shipped as well, and I just need to connect it back and all up again.
Now, but wait, what about security? Because with all the different things going on, all the hacking, all the vulnerabilities, what are you doing?
So we are protected with the industry-leading cloud-native security solution called NewVector. It's covering data loss prevention, deep packet inspection, layer 7 filtering between pods to pod, service to service, cluster to cluster. We're all safe. Don't worry about that.
Wow, so you know a lot about cloud-native security. How do you do it?
Yeah, well, besides the store, I have a side gig as CTO of SUSE.
Well, that's not something you hear every day.
No. And the other thing that you don't hear every day is that today we are live in Munich with DemoPalooza.
Woohoo!
Hey everybody, welcome to DemoPalooza 23. It's great to see everybody in 3D versus 2D. If I see another screen and faces on it, it's going to drive me a little bit crazy. So thanks for being here. It's a great pleasure for us to be here to present to all of you. Lots of things going on today. You saw a little demonstration of the retail edge. We're going to be talking about traditional deployments, traditional workloads, and the journey that we're all on together, the maturity life cycle of moving from traditional to cloud-native approaches, things that we call platform down in the traditional speak, and then platform up as a native cloud-native kind of deployment. So thanks again for being here. We're looking forward to thrilling and amazing you with all of this technology. So we'll be here for about 4 hours. If everybody remembers the last DemoPalooza, we've made sure that people won't be unplugging our stuff behind the scenes, so people go a little crazy when you do that. So on stage with me today, we have Cristobal Ortega from the US.
Thank you.
Cameron Cedar, a friend of mine, he's the director of SEs. John Pugh. And I'm some crazy drummer guy that they got to stand up here, and I...
Come on, you got to give a big round of applause for our drummer, Jeff Price.
Thanks, John. All right, so like I said, we're talking about cloud-native approaches. We're talking about traditional workloads. How many people are using SUSE Manager today? All right, so I wanted to give us some examples of how we're also on this maturity life cycle of bringing cloud-native to our traditional deployments, traditional products like SUSE Manager. Does everybody know that you can now deploy SUSE Manager, the retail components like the branch server and the proxy servers as containerized workloads? Yeah, right on. So thanks very much. Shout out to Don Vosberg. I'm sure I heard a woo-hoo out there. Yeah, there it is. My DemoPalooza is complete. In addition, we have things for SAP, where we're also adding containerized capabilities with Trento. Shout out to Trento team. All right. So again, you're going to see a lot more mixtures of traditional and cloud-native approaches. In fact, SUSE Manager, right? We were talking about this.
Yes.
Addressing, cloud-native typically is addressing the challenges of scale. And again, to my friends in the SUSE Manager community, the ability to deploy and be able to manage tens of thousands of nodes with the scale-out architecture that we call the hub. So I know, it's crazy. So Christabel, you have a customer today that is deploying how many thousands of nodes?
Yeah, a customer out of Ohio is deploying 90,000 nodes
Okay.
using SUSE Manager.
So that's a considerable amount of devices under management. I am talking to customers a lot and talking about our universal Linux management tool that we call SUSE Manager, and that's an important point, something that we're differentiating the marketplace. It's not just our own OSs, although we love to see them deployed. We're able to manage other OSs, other Linux distributions, in addition to SLES. And as we're adding more capabilities and different types of SLES deployments, including the SLE Micro and integrating SLE Micro with our deployments for Edge. We'll talk a little bit about that, and again, shout out to the Edge 2.0 team and Elemental. You'll see a lot of things here. So deployments here on stage, it's live without a net. We tried to sacrifice enough rubber chickens backstage to make sure our demos go without a hitch. But finding rubber chickens in Germany has been a little tough, so we should have shipped them. Maybe we can talk to Amazon, have them 2-minute delivered or something. So we'll see if we can do that. Some things about the mix and the cloud-native journey that we're all on. There's the early adopters. There's that radical, cutting edge, and then there's the mainstream adoption. But again, this maturity, this change-up of our people, our processes, and tools in traditional IT, it's a challenge. But we're adopting that same challenge to meet our customers in those same approaches by enabling our other products and all of our products to have multiple means of deployment and multiple methods of deployment. So I guess at this point, let's talk a little bit about how we can mix a traditional approach of configuration management, provisioning, and things like that. Cameron, what could we kind of describe in the way of a demo to kind of mix the two, say a traditional or what I call a platform down approach, where we care about the nodes themselves, a more of a pet approach. I know my host names, I know my IP addresses, and there's things like CVEs and patches, but then a shifting to a cloud native or a platform up, where the nodes themselves or the endpoints, the hosts, become just as ephemeral as the workloads on top of them. In the case of Elemental, that's very much the case, where we can replace and do things with nodes in a more ephemeral way.
Yeah. Obviously, SUSE Manager is bridging that gap very, very well. I love that tool just because I always think about what can I do with that tool?
Right.
What can I make it do? Obviously, there's so many things that you can do with it. Let's get SUSE Manager up on the screen, on screen number 1.
Everybody does.
What I wanted to go through just briefly, now I'm going to say up front, there's nothing configured here in terms of deploying K3S from a SUSE Manager system. But you could use it to do that. Because it is so dynamic, it has configuration management built in, which means it does have SALT capabilities. And we integrated SALT many years ago into SUSE Manager, which gives it a lot of ability to do many different things. The sky really is the limit. We have done many different projects from a consulting perspective, and one of those is to actually deploy RKE and K3S directly from SUSE Manager and automate the process of actually registering that node or a cluster specifically into Rancher. And the way that you would go about that is setting up under systems your activation keys. Wow.
Better log in.
Better log in. We're just timing out here.
It's security at its finest.
Time to call the kids.
That was just warning you that he's logging into your SUSE manager system, you know.
Well, you know, it's automation. We have consultants for that.
I better use the right user. There we go. You start with your activation keys, which give you a baseline for what your systems are going to use to configure your software channels, any configuration channels that those systems might get. And in this case, if you're deploying it for K3S, it would actually add in any configuration that you would need for a K3S system. Once that is configured, you then go down over to your configuration management and set up your your configuration channels for that. You would add one, you'd go in and create a configuration channel for K3S. Once that's created, you would create what's called the K3S agent, which would go out and install K3S out on your any node that you're managing using SUSE Manager. In this case, you could potentially use SUSE Manager to actually create a software image of your system that's going to be installed, whether it's virtualized or a physical system. And you would go and just plug that thumb drive in or plug in the image into your virtualization platform, whether it's VMware or KVM, and boot that up. It would bootstrap it with your key that you defined up here, your activation key, already inside of that image. And once it boots up, it actually takes hold of that key, gets the configuration management and the software channels already defined, and it registers itself to SUSE Manager. So it does that process all automatically, which is really slick. I mean, that's a pretty easy process. And there's a nice document that somebody wrote that you can go walk through and do that on your own. So
speaking of documents, right, just real quick, something again that we're doing a little bit different, right, is we've created a GitHub entry for our DemoPalooza stuff. So this live without a net demonstration and all the code that we're using behind the scenes, we put it on GitHub so that you can get to it. And so when you are amazed and hopefully not confused by our presentation today, you'll be able to go home and share this with your friends, be able to kick this up in your own labs, and be able to kind of open issues and ask us questions about it. So hopefully that's something we can contribute back to you in the spirit of open and just see how crazy this is. So
I think the major thing to really understand about SUSE Manager from a platform down approach is that it's very flexible in a lot of ways, right? Managing 90,000 nodes to, much less than that, or, just an edge cluster that might be small, to an entire data center, right? I mean, very, very flexible in what it can do.
And even from a platform down perspective, in this way, you could then manage the CVEs, the patches, whether it's built on top, that platform is built on top of SLES or Sleep Micro, and be able to manage your updates and your reboots and all of these things. You can still manage that with a little bit of code to be able to, cordon off your nodes, be able to drain those nodes, be able to rotate and reboot. A consultant that I know here in Germany, Martin Weiss, has written some things also that he's put up on GitHub to be able to enable that kind of platform down, where platform down and platform up, cloud native, meet each other in the middle. And that helps people who are on this journey for maturization of their cloud native approaches to doing containerization and those things. So it's kind of a mix of both worlds.
Hey, Jeff, and so platform down, is that like naming servers like pets and stuff like that, right?
It can be, but also bridging that gap because it's allowing you to deploy these things that then allow you to then move into cloud native approaches. So a cloud native approach way to doing updates is where something like NewVector would come in and be able to expose those same CVEs. The difference in the case of NewVector is where you have some insulation against any of those vulnerabilities.
Because that's what Dr. T was talking about in our store, right? That's how he protects himself from a security point of view.
So that cloud native deployment, even those 0-day new vulnerabilities that come out have no effect because you are insulated, because you've produced or learned your environment. It's kind of it's a very Greek or Stoic approach to not only knowing thyself, but knowing thy code and being able to understand the processes, the point-to-point communications, the network traffic, the ins and the outs, and being able to wrap a set of rules that then are enforced, and that's then that insulation that keeps you from being affected by it. Other things around, this massive number of nodes and our universal Linux management tool that we call SUSE Manager. There's other things, Salt isn't the only thing that some of our customers are using. Sometimes they've made an investment in, Ansible notebooks and things like that.
Right.
It's very cool to understand that our universal Linux management tool that we call SUSE, you like that phrase? It's just ringing right. It can also run Ansible playbooks, right? And so we are extending the capabilities to knock down the borders and give people a universal platform for management to make it easy. So you don't have to just know Salt. You can also know those things that you've invested in. So we're meeting you on the road wherever you are to be able to make your lives easier. And this is all about the reduction of friction, the optimization of your environments, making it very easy to do those things because the journey, the cloud native maturization we're talking about, it's not as quick as everybody would like. And to be able to realize the benefits from that, we must make it easier, remove those frictions. So it's a big point around what we're doing in our development process, and we're on the road and that journey with you. What else? What are some other things? We talked a little bit about, gave a shout out to the Trento team, SLES for SAP. A lot of the things that we see in frictions there, we've created Trento as this way to give visibility and insight into the tuning and setup of the clusters that we have as the natural feature and capability within SLES for SAP. So Trento is another containerized deployment, and we're having the ability now to put this tool very easily in place so people can see, oh, hey, as my workloads change and move, because deploying on HANA and things like that, it's a database. It continues to grow, right? The resource consumption on these deployments continue to happen. Trento can give you the visibility to say, hey, your timeouts, your cluster isn't set up correctly, or over time it needs to be tuned, or you want to implement and integrate, SAP notes as they become published, and get yourself some alerting and some visibility and notifications on your SLES for SAP deployment. Trento is a big help. And is that extra? Is that an extra? Right now, it's included with the SLES for SAP product set. So if you have SLES for SAP, you have Trento, and if you need help installing that, give us a call. Again, we've got services and expertise available to help you deploy that, and also some great documentation so you can get started. So that's another thing. What can we show around Trento? Perhaps show them what the capabilities there look like? Or
well, I mean, it's got a lot of components, right? So there's a lot of things you got to do to install Trento. It's a containerized environment.
Yep.
So there's easy ways to do that with some of the Rancher tools.
Well, how would we do that in a cloud native way? How could we help our customers deploy something that is...
Let's use Fleet.
Fleet. What's Fleet?
Well, Fleet is a GitOps tool that is built right into Rancher.
So is it an extra product?
No, definitely not.
It's a feature.
It's a feature.
It's a feature. It's a capability. So what we're also going to do, again, we have this Git repository that we've created. We've created a Fleet YAML that you can use, so this deployment is a little bit easier, right?
That's right. Let's show display one. This is where you want to get to, is this Trento dashboard. So how do you get here really fast? And this is by going into the Rancher dashboard. If you had some cloud native folks, you're an SAP basis guy, you don't know how to use Rancher or any cloud native tools, pass it on over to them. Say, here, I got this fleet from the guys here at DemoPalooza. But we have this this Git repo. We've called it Trento test in this particular one here. Let's go ahead and look at the configuration. It's just a really small config. It's pointing to a URL, and really that URL points to our GitHub, and it goes to another path. At the very bottom there, it's got a path inside that GitHub, which points to what we call a fleet.yaml. And that file actually only contains, what, 4 lines?
Yeah, it's pretty small.
It's pretty small.
Yeah, they've made it really easy to deploy.
Yep.
And you create those lines in that path. Very simple to do. You just point to that Helm repository. We set it up here, and
we've got one target. It's on currently one node, which is actually a cluster. Okay, and so that cluster is a K3S cluster. We're actually running multiple clusters in this environment over here. So really easy to do.
yeah, and it set everything up for you, right? So you just created a target, and it set everything up for you. Once you click next to deploy that, it listed everything out, and boom, everything was installed.
Right, here's all the different resources that are actually deployed out there onto that cluster.
Wow, so you
Right.
deployed all of that,
All that from one single fleet,
and that fleet YAML
line.
just had a couple of lines.
just a couple of lines.
Amazing.
So that was pulling in the Helm chart and everything associated with that Helm chart.
Wow. Very cool.
What does Trento look like?
So let's go back to that. Here's Trento here. This is actually the standard dashboard that you'll hit when you log in.
Okay.
Now, they're demonstrating this in one of the booths here, right?
They are.
Upstairs, I think.
believe so.
They've got a Trento demonstration. So if you haven't seen Trento and what it can do in your SAP environment, you need to go stop by there and take a look. It's a pretty powerful tool that gives you some great insights into the health of your clusters and what's going on from a Sleds for SAP point of view.
Absolutely.
I was recently visiting a customer that we were talking about how an outage, they're a manufacturing company and making paper products, you know, those essential paper products, you know, the really essential paper products. And I talked to them about, well,
Wait, how essential were those paper products, Jeff?
they're super essential, you know. Well, essential for some people. Some people use a little bit more of the paper products than other people, you know, a long story.
Maybe Andrew Waffa needs some of those for his unicorns.
So I asked them, I said, hey, speaking of paper products, what does an outage, if you were to have one, what kind of effects does that have? And you know, those paper products being essentials, they talked about if they had to shut down one of these lines, it could actually cause a backup. And I mean, not that kind of backup, but a literal backup in their production line would cause them to stop loading trucks for this essential paper product. And they said it could involve backing up the trucks and the trucks backing up onto the freeway, causing lots of issues for that local area. You know, police and fire trucks getting involved in traffic jams because of that essential paper product. And I asked them, and they were reluctant to say, I said, how much do you think an outage like that would cost you? You know, other than the embarrassing moments and everything else. And they didn't really want to say, because immediately they thought that we'd just ask for that money and upgrades and things like that. But very expensive, very critical outage. Visibility of their cluster not being set up correctly or having some tuning elements, taking care of the critical issues that Trento points out, immediately gave them some, you know, some real hope that they have visibility and notifications around their SAP systems to avoid those kind of backup issues.
So Trento's kind of an important thing when it comes to Sleds for SAP, huh?
Again, reducing friction, right? Removing those blockages or those potential bad environmental conditions for their SAP deployments. Trento's a big deal.
Jeff, you're just full of puns tonight.
I know, I'm a punny guy. All right, so moving from, again, we're on this maturization, we're on that journey with our customers, moving our traditional products into more and more cloud-native ways, giving people lots of options for how they're deploying these things. Christabel, we also have some customers that we visited together, right, moving towards cloud-native things. We're kind of showing here with our edge deployments. We're kind of representing some of these different edge deployments here. In fact, each one of these displays is another elemental or edge deployment, and we're representing some of these edge workloads. We actually have customers that deploy on ships and, electric and infrastructure.
On the ships, we have customers that are using Rancher to do geo-mapping of the sea floors to give oil and gas companies analytics on how their assets will affect the Earth and how the Earth will affect their assets. Wind farms, airlines, energy companies as well. A lot of these locations are very isolated with little to no connectivity, and with Rancher, they're able to accomplish that, and satellites.
So loosely connected in some cases. I know in the oil and gas industry, we have some customers that are looking and using elemental in deployments, and they'll be disconnected for a considerable amount of time. These ships that go out of port, they're disconnected for a considerable amount of time, and as we mentioned earlier, they'll come back into port, they'll regain that connectivity, and then be able to do updates and deployments once they've reconnected. Or in the case of data collection, oil, gas, getting seismic information on these trucks, where they've actually got Kubernetes and these edge workloads deployed in the trucks, going out with sensor arrays and collecting that information into the truck, and then coming back into, Texas is a big place, right?
It is a big place. It takes about 19 hours to get through Texas.
Somebody told me that the entire, like France could fit inside of Texas, right? So pretty big area, so disconnected from their Rancher infrastructure, they can collect their data, come back in, and again, they're doing a lot of really interesting things with their deployment. But these workloads are all, I think most of these are backed by Raspberry Pis. So another cool thing about Elemental right now, it's an experimental thing, but you can actually use a Raspberry Pi to deploy and test Elemental. And when we're talking about all these edge capabilities, some of the things, have you guys heard of ACRI? So in this case, we've got cameras and everything else that are auto-detected, and it'll actually use that hardware that gets attached. So think about a small form factor that you can actually just plug a device into, or that it becomes aware of, whether it's a camera or sensor arrays, CAN bus integration. All of those sensors then can actually inform what gets deployed as far as workloads on that particular end node. So that's very interesting. You can set up things like cameras and displays, and they're auto-detected, and then the workloads find the node that has a particular device. So instead of you dictating where the workload goes because you know what device is connected, now you simply set up the deployment and the rules, and the workloads find the viable node that has the particular device to feed that deployment. So very interesting way of turning it on its head, right? Instead of you having to have ultimate understanding, you can simply define, okay, here's the workload, find a node that has a particular camera. So the selector can actually help you deploy things, and this is where IoT Edge and other things become a much, much simpler way, again, back to reducing frictions for how you deploy these workloads in a variety of instances. Speaking of which, we had kind of this retail deployment here. Some of the other features, right? Things, that we don't think about. Reduction of friction. You and Dr. T were talking about how easy it was for him to do his store upgrade.
Yeah, he said it was really simple, right?
All right, didn't need any special training. How did he get that device in the first place?
Well, one of the things you always say is that software eventually works,
and hardware eventually fails.
Not it.
All right, so We were going to
Well-
blame Christabel for this, but
Dr. T must have rigged this somehow.
yeah, I think there's something going on. Well, you know what? In the case of Elemental, right, the setup, it's a two-part process, right? You are, doing an inventory of your nodes, right?
Yes.
So this inventory can be pre-done. So our customers that are working with a particular hardware vendor, you can actually, as part of this inventory process, you can prepare an image for them, and they can load it on this hardware so that you can just drop ship it. In fact, we have a lot of customers that are able to do this so that they can literally, reduction of friction, instead of having to have all of this expertise and knowledge, you can get a device and literally take it out of the box and replace it. So,
Wow.
What's happening?
That was fast.
Delivering sheer edge pressure.
well, I've heard a 2-day delivery, right? But this is, I guess, 2-minute delivery. The idea is you can get your hardware replacements or stock it in your closet. And when we're talking about, edge devices, they're pretty small and yet capable. And the idea is that you can drop ship a replacement out, simply plug it in. And the concept here is you don't need a lot of skills, or you just take it out, plug the blue stickered piece and the blue wire and the yellow sticker, turn it on. Elemental allows that node to then phone home and set up and deploy all those workloads. Again, reducing the friction for edge deployments, making it very, very easy for those things to naturally fit into
Jeff,
those ideas.
that sounds really hard.
You're
Well,
telling me that Thomas didn't need any training? He just needed to know
Well,
Well,
the
Jeff did
yellow goes into the yellow.
I didn't need any training either. So, the concept again, making it very easy for our customers to be able to do cloud-native deployments and management of edge devices and management of edge deployments in a very, very easy way. So that's kind of Elemental, kind of like Sherlock Holmes, right? All right. So on that note, there's some other things that we wanted to share. Can we kind of show an Elemental kind of dashboard,
Absolutely.
what that inventory looks like and the processes involved?
Yeah, let's go ahead and show display one. So this is Elemental. This is the inventory of our machines that we have here, and you'll notice that they have clusters loaded on them on the right-hand side. This is what you want to achieve here when you're using the OS management Elemental in Rancher. The way that you actually install that would be under the new extensions component here under Rancher. Once you go to extensions, you will see Elemental under the Available tab. I, of course, have already installed it, so it shows up under Installed. But your environment might not have it installed yet. So you would install it there, and then there's an additional component that gets installed using a Helm chart. And that's it, and then you have Elemental ready to go.
So an extension is, what does it mean, an extension? What is it extending?
We are extending Rancher
Okay.
to have extra components. And as you see on the screen here, you can extend it with KubeWarden, and then you also have the virtualization management there.
And that's Harvester.
That's Harvester.
Okay, so which is
Correct.
an HCI or hyper-converged infrastructure solution.
Which we heard earlier in yesterday's keynote, BMW is using Harvester.
Okay, awesome.
So to continue on with that, to get to this point of having inventoried machines, Jeff was just talking about the two-step approach and being able to create the thumb drive that you plug in or give to your manufacturer so that they can actually deploy these. So you would go into the registration endpoints, create your own endpoints. I'm going to look at one here, NUC cluster, which is what we have over here. John's plugging it in. Now, this actually has a registration URL. When you create it, it will configure this for you. And you create a cloud config, which has several different labels that you can define. Our documentation has a few in there, and there are additional ones that you might want to add, so there's some customizations that you might want to do. Obviously, this is some really old hardware, so I needed to emulate TPM, which you probably wouldn't want to do that in a production environment. You could test this out in a virtualized environment and use the emulated TPM. So we had to use that because the hardware is too old. It doesn't have TPM version 2.0.
So that doesn't keep you from trying this and understanding the capability.
That's correct.
The trusted platform module is that layer of security. So in addition to having your own, looks like SSL connection back to Rancher or phoning home, it's leveraging the trusted platform module as a unique hash that it can check against so that people can't just run off with your hardware.
That's right.
Okay.
Once you have that built out, you can then click on the Build ISO, and it will integrate your cloud configuration and the registration URL into that ISO image that you can use to boot and register that system to Rancher.
So once that's
Pretty
done,
easy.
that's that registration process. That's the step one, right?
That's step one.
Okay, so you get an inventory, right? So you'd have an
Right.
inventory of machines that you would be able to see here, okay? And then, as far as taking it to the next step, does this include the Kubernetes and everything else on it at this point, or is it?
Not at this point. So then once you have the node that comes up as an inventoried machine, you can take and select multiple nodes. In this case, I only have one node that is available. The rest of them already have clusters on them. But if I had, say, 5 nodes, I could select 5 nodes, and I could apply a cluster to it. In this case, I'm going to use this one and select here and create an elemental cluster. Okay.
Okay.
And this will give me the option. This is very similar. You might be familiar with this screen. It looks very familiar in terms of creating a downstream cluster in Rancher in other ways, like for public cloud deployments or in a virtualized platform. It looks very similar. I could call this test. Okay.
That's what I call mine.
Yeah, sure. Why not? And I could select the roles, just like you do any other cluster creation in Rancher, and pick your Kubernetes version if it's RKE2 or K3S. It's a single node. I'm going to go ahead and create that. Obviously, there's a lot of other cluster configuration that you can do. You can apply labels, and these are great for the GitOps integration with Fleet, being able to create groupings of systems that you apply your application stacks to. And then you go ahead and hit create, and this immediately will begin provisioning that. At the very bottom, the one in the middle is the one that went kaput.
The one that blowed up real good?
The blowed up.
Okay. So at this point, you are now installing that platform to give you the platform up capabilities. And those labels you talked about, if you had an association in, for example, with Fleet, our automation, you could actually deploy all of the applications that you had, your cloud-native applications, simply by adding a label appropriate to that deployment. I've done that, especially to demonstrate new vector. I just simply have a label that says add NV, and any cluster that I'm deploying that has the add NV label on it.
Well, let's look at that while that one's actually spinning up there.
Looks like it's
So if you take this one, these ones that are RPi, these are all Raspberry Pis. These are 5 different clusters. If I edit the config of that cluster, I can, again, go back down and I can edit those labels anytime, okay? I've added a key value pair here. I've done cluster type, and the value is ACRI. And so I'm tying that into, if I go over here, my continuous delivery, which is the fleet, okay? And I've created a group called ACRI clusters. And that key value pair that I've used there is part of this config. I've actually done if I edit this config, you can see it better. The cluster selector here is cluster type ACRI. So any label I put on my clusters, I can then pick those up using the cluster group in my continuous delivery, and it will pick those up so that I can deploy a workload
So
to
we
that.
can automatically evaluate any of those nodes that have that particular label, or those, clusters that have that label,
That's right.
and it's going to automatically deploy that workload.
Exactly.
So in this way, you can actually automate the deployment by type, again, by hardware. All of those different selectors can help you specify exactly what workloads you want on which clusters, and that automation takes place. So in the case of drop shipping hardware out to an endpoint, them having a failure, replacing the hardware, again, because hardware eventually fails, right, John?
Yep.
In this case, the software that eventually works on the new hardware is all configured as well. Right?
Now, you can also do the same thing with software there too, right, Cameron? And you can update a whole bunch of, update a fleet of clusters
Yeah,
with
absolutely.
one click.
With one click.
You update your workload and then click, boom, you're done.
Yes.
And what if you made a mistake? In the case of John,
What do you mean?
my
If
point
you
is,
made a mistake, it's okay, John.
yeah, accidents
Because
happen.
it's stored in your GitHub, right?
That's
And
right.
You're just going to go and make a change and push that to your GitHub repository.
Okay, so wait a
It
minute.
will update automatically.
So Fleet picks that up automatically.
That's right.
So that's why it's
And that's why we have these Git repos here. In the case I was showing you here earlier with ACRI, I have these ACRI config displays. Okay, each one of these Git repos is used to deploy a particular workload. Okay, and I'm actually deploying it on some clusters here. The RPi clusters are all being deployed with those. Now, those are being.
Did you raise your hand, Jeff?
No, I was
I think
simply
you did.
moving all this massive amount of hair that I don't have anymore.
So you deployed, these are some of those things we've deployed
They
too, right?
are, yes. Those
With
are all
ACRI.
Kubernetes clusters, yes.
That's correct.
Very cool.
So in this case, tying in, part of the demo that we were working on is to show how easy it is to take status on the clusters, things like readiness or liveness probes, and tie that into states to be able to affect. So we've actually deployed I think this is a X server
Yep.
and a kiosk mode browser,
Yep.
and actually taking live components from the back end. So when it's coming up for the first time and it's not ready, all of this iconography is not colorized. So,
Right.
and as it becomes live, then the color changes. So this again automatically will change state based on the capabilities or the readiness of a particular cluster.
And these are kind of representative of some of the customers that you've dealt with in the past or worked with in the past, right? So they have, cruise ships, trains,
Yeah,
windmills you mentioned.
Yeah, well, especially with the windmills, you need some really tall ladders.
It's
so
kind of
having
dangerous, huh?
very dangerous. And then also, in stores, a lot of retail branches, not only the point of sale systems, but also the check-in systems and their cameras. And a lot of the customers what they're wanting to do is use AI and be able to understand what aisles customers are going down and what they're purchasing and different lanes like that. And we're able to expedite that with these workloads.
That's awesome.
We've seen some really interesting things from Fujitsu around their ability to determine heat maps, again, where customers are, even what customers are looking at in the stores. Very creepy and cool stuff. Being able to tell, what products are of interest, being able to tell that a product is missing right? Especially these grab-and-go stores. Some grab-and-go stores that aren't grab-and-go, they can tell who's grabbing and who's going.
Yeah. Absolutely can.
And these kind of things, bringing AI and capabilities of computer vision. What we saw during the first cloud push of everything, being moved into cloud hyperscalers and things like that, now we're seeing people being able to deploy edge workloads, right-sized, hardware back into the stores to be able to enable this next step in cloud-native capabilities and edge workloads, including AI and capabilities. I'm so glad we're not having a conversation about ChatGPT right now, but of course I just said it. So, but these kind of capabilities, putting right-sized hardware back into the stores to enable edge compute, and really to simplify things. This seems maybe at this point a little bit too late to describe it and normalize what edge is, but this is about moving compute as close to the consumer as possible to avoid latency. In the case of mission critical or life critical deployments, if you have to make a decision by moving data up away from you, putting it into workloads in the cloud, and then coming back down. In the case of self-driving cars, I like to say in the case of, a car driving along and poor Timmy running out into the street, chasing a ball, if you have to go to the cloud and make a decision, come back, poor Timmy, right? So mission critical or life critical. And so, other non-macabre instances would be the edge devices that we carry around with us every day. I was talking to somebody about Instagram filters, drawing, ears on your selfie and things like that. That compute is being done right here.
Now we've shown a couple of different ways of managing things, right? You've talked about platform
down.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Where we take SUSE Manager to manage these machines, these devices, K3S. But we also talked about the platform up approach too. So we're giving customers a choice on how they want to go about managing their complex environments.
And while a lot of them want to move to cloud native and they want to switch how their teams are set up, one of the challenges that we hear our customers talk about, and it's kind of crazy, you have the ability to have security working more up front. You've heard about shift left and how security is not an afterthought anymore. We have the ability, as you joked earlier, about security teams and development teams and engineering teams working together, right? So these kind of these things that we're trying to remove friction around is to speed up the process. Because if it's this great thing to be all cloud native, the challenge is that it's difficult in terms of changing your people, processes, and tools. So by removing frictions and making everything easy and us meeting our customers where they are on that journey, and us, having that same journey ourselves, improving our capabilities and how we're creating software to make it easier to deploy and manage your infrastructure, this is that sweet spot, and it is really resonating with our customers. So I think, at this point, we could kind of, anything else you want to mention?
I think I've mentioned a lot.
Yeah, it's really nice to have you here to keep us on track, John.
It really is nice to be here, actually, with all of our fellow constituents.
Yeah, the 3D world.
And it's great to have Thomas on this stage with us as well.
I'm so excited about
Mike?
None of the demo failed, actually. So how come? Can you fail something at least to make sure it's real, or?
Well, it's because we only have so many hours of the fire marshal here to allow for smoke to be, we didn't want to have everything blow up, but.
No, but it was very exciting to see how SUSE can help bridge cloud native and traditional. Tonight you have to explain me the platform upside down concept a little bit more, but before we close shop,
okay, nice. Close the
I would like to welcome someone on stage who, without that person, none of that would be possible. And we have a couple of housekeeping aspects as well to cover. So please, warm welcome to our VP of Global Event.
We're just about ready to go. I want to say, again, thank you to everybody for DemoPalooza. Appreciate all the effort there.